Garry Palmer, or should I say Dr. Garry Palmer, probably quite rightly should be Professor Garry Palmer. Welcome to Titanium Geek. So thanks ever so much for taking the time. Obviously, you've just been saying off record that, you've got numerous months of clients now who require testing, and, to take the time out to do this, really appreciate it.
No problem at all. It's getting busy, should we put it that way?
Yeah, but it is, blooming heck. So we're going to do some quick fire questions for people who are cyclists and also use indoor training platforms. So I know you won't beat about the bush with all this sort of stuff, so it'd be really good. So I've got them written down here. I might have to put on my glasses without looking. I sort of look like one of these old Frankie Howard sort of characters. So here we go. So if you were the emperor of training, what misunderstood bullshit would you ban?
Well, I've got the same list as you, and I'm laughing because number 3, FTP tests.
Oh, right. Yeah, go on. Tell us why.
It's a single data point. It's one data point. And does that one data point refer to everything? No, I don't think it does. I think it's been banded as the all-seeing, all-doing, all-singing, all-dancing one data point that gives you all your training zones. And I genuinely don't believe it does. So that's FTP would go. That would be in my room 101.
Fantastic.
Now, I could bang on and go, because I do things differently, because at Sports Test we look at whole physiological metabolic profile, where we look at endurance, we look at threshold, we look at peak, we look at recovery, we look at efficiency, we look at fat metabolism, we look at carb metabolism. We look at the whole metabolic profile, and you've got this whole spectrum. Now, depending on that spectrum, depending on whether you're a sportive rider, whether you're riding time trials, whether you're riding cyclocross, whether you're riding crits, that metabolic profile needs to be different. I've got one FTP data point. It's like walking into your garage and saying, I want to buy a new car. And, oh, that's great, sir. And you go, well, I want to buy it depending on what top of speed it does. You don't know about what engine capacity it's got. You don't know about what braking capacity it's got. You don't know how well it corners. You don't know how many suitcases you can get in the boot. Where's the bike going to go? How many people does it fit? All you know is it's got a top speed of 70 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour. You bought that car on one data point. You wouldn't do that. Why are you basing all of your training on one data point?
Fantastic. It's great. So second question then. What are your top 3 bits of cycle tech that all cyclists should have?
Again, I like to be off the wall with this. The first one, a working bright backlight.
Oh, very good.
I go out so often, and if you've seen the new Vost Sports Test cycling kit, it's bright orange. It is in your face. And even my older kit, the purple and white, the purple and orange, you could see that down the road. We've got some stealth black Sports Test kit, and yeah, it's black and purple. We use it quite a lot. Even on a day like today, which we can see through the blind, which you might edit out later on, but we can see it's bright and sunny outdoors today. There will be people riding down the road in black kit in the shade of the hedgerow. It leads us there to be run over. And, as cyclists, I think we've got to be looking out for ourselves. We're looking out for other road drivers. Make people aware that you're there. Don't let people have an excuse to give you a close pass. Be as bright and as leery as you possibly can. And even going out with bright kit on a sunny day, that backlight, people will pick that up from 200-300 meters away. So the first top bit of kit, tech, and it's simple tech that I would go for, is a good, solid working backlight. Regardless of whether you're riding to the shops or whether you're going out and riding your time trial or doing your training ride, make sure your light is on and working. Number 1. Number 2, again, because the way I work and looking at physiology has to be a heart rate monitor. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a fancy Garmin, you've got a fancy power meter. I've got a box under here that's got a fancy portable oxygen analyzer. A heart rate monitor. It gives me an understanding, we'll come back to that car scenario, of how hard the engine is revving, what your body is actually doing. Now, again, in isolation, a heart rate is almost pretty useless. So we need to look at another piece of kit with it. And that piece of kit could be as simple as a speedo. So, note down what your average speed is, but ideally it's more like a GPS system. So you're going to use your GPS system. So you've got your speed, you've tracked your distance, you've tracked your climbing, you've tracked all of that information, but you're looking at your physiology, which is what your heart rate is doing. Now, I know a lot of cyclists, and again, bit controversial on this. A lot of cyclists think power is king, but power in isolation, in my mind, is not really much use. You know, it's like the car with, you know, it's almost like as valuable as an FTP test. Looking at power and heart rate, looking at speed and heart rate, fine. But looking at what the physiology is doing, looking at what my heart rate is doing, what my heart rate is doing at rest, what my heart rate is doing, you know, when I'm climbing, what my heart rate is doing, even to the point of, oh, I'm stressed before an event, my heart rate is up. It will tell me about hydration levels. It will tell me about feeding levels. It will tell me about rest and recovery more than my power meter will do. I use it in combination, but backlight, heart rate monitor, speedo or GPS system.
And any preference over GPS system?
I probably use the biggest brand that's obviously just fallen over very recently. I used to use Polar. I used to love Polar as a heart rate monitor, but I found the Garmin technology, because of their GPS, overtook Polar. So, you know, in the lab, I'm still a Polar man because I don't need the GPS technology. On the road, you know, and I live in it. I mean, I think people have seen this before. I you know, do this all the time to show you how often my watch comes off. You know, that's, my watch is on permanently. I've got my permanent tan line. I wear it really quite tight so that I'm constantly recording my heart rate and seeing what's going on. So, you know, my personal brand at the moment, I'm not sponsored by them, would genuinely be Garmin. But if somebody wants to send me something else for me to try out and use, I'm always open to offers.
I'm testing at the moment the Stages computer, and I must admit,
yeah,
it's very difficult to write the review just because I'm so used to Garmin.
But is it wearable, David?
No.
So again, you've got to remember, I pretend to be a runner and triathlete, and I like the wearable technology so that I'm not just looking at what my heart rate is doing while I'm training. I'm looking at what my heart rate is doing over a 24-hour period. So I'm getting resting, I'm getting peaks, I'm getting stress levels. I'm able to associate that with things like weight loss as days go on, and making sure I'm drinking properly and all those other factors. So it's more than just what's going on the bike for me. That's
very good. I'm an Apple Watch user. There you go. So it's what it's like once you plug it into Apple. Right, that's good stuff. So really good stuff. So the FTP test, question 3, FPT test, how often, under what conditions? I think we've got the answer to that one.
Yeah, again, there's an in fairness to that. So I would say to you, if we flick it around, say sports test, you know, how often and under what conditions? You know, come in for a full profile. Well, you don't want to be coming in and spending 3 hours of your time with me, you know, every other week. So realistically, I would say to people, if you can come in for a sports test, you come in 2, 3, maybe 4 times a year. You come in when you're going really well, because we want to understand why you're going really well, and actually if there are still advances and developments that we can find from you. You maybe come in when you're going really badly, because again, we will understand why you're going really badly and maybe be able to correct that. And then you maybe come in at change of phases or change of seasons. So you come in at the start of your winter base phase, so we can make sure that your heart rates, your training zones are set up, and we know what your strengths and weaknesses are going into that major winter training phase. And again, maybe coming into the summer race phase, so that we can see where your strengths and weaknesses are and adapt your training program accordingly. Now, that's a sports test, and that's going through that whole profile. But at this point, I wouldn't necessarily rule out doing, and whether we call it a 20-minute test, an FTP test, or what have you, I wouldn't rule out going and riding the equivalent of an FTP test by doing a 10-mile time trial, or having a piece of road that you go out and test yourself on. And in that case, you maybe try and do that in a controlled fashion with relatively fresh legs once every 4 to 6 weeks, so that you can benchmark what's going on at home. But again, remembering that's only giving you one data point. It doesn't tell you what's going on aerobic base. It doesn't tell you what's going on anaerobically. It just tells you how much you can hurt yourself in that position for that duration. In which case, you try and do it as standardized as possible. But there's lots of ways that you can do that without necessarily doing an FTP test.
Super, thank you. So in your role of Emperor again, what bad training tech would you ban, and for what reasons?
I wouldn't say it's bad training tech. And maybe banning it's a bit extreme.
What horrid.
But you know I'm going to be controversial. So it begins with a Z and it's very orange.
Like your kit.
You like my kit? I've got what I could say is a love-hate relationship with Zwift. And I think as an online platform, it's absolutely brilliant. As a social platform, it's bloody marvelous. At bringing people into the sport and getting people on a bike and keeping them interested, it's absolutely phenomenal. The problem is that if you are a cyclist and potentially a developing or a novice cyclist, in my mind, the way that Zwift is set up with the gaming aspect and everything else, and even to a certain extent the social aspect, you end up being dragged into racing all the time. It's very difficult to jump on there and think, these are my heart rate zones, and I'm going to sit and I'm going to ignore everything else that's going on in Watopia or London or wherever you're going to go and ride on Zwift these days. I'm going to avoid everything that's going on, and I'm just going to do my ride. Because the chances are somebody's going to come flying past you and you're going to go, oh, I'm going to sit on them, or, and you end up, whether you sign up for a race and I've heard of people racing 3, 4, 5 times a week because they're signing up for the next race. And there are some great training sessions that are organised by, you guys do some great groups out there, whether it's KISS, whether it's, 3Rs, whoever it might be. There's some great training sessions. I've been on them, I've done them, some phenomenal stuff. But you can be doing too much top end, too much high intensity, and ignore the base work. So I wouldn't call it bad training tech. I just think, and they've set themselves in the market that's right. It's that right social element. It drags you on. You can organise to meet a certain person at a certain time. Fantastic. But I think it drags people in the wrong direction. So maybe I wouldn't completely ban it, but I'd limit its use.
Okay, that's good for me. Right, okay, that's good. It's on a previous one of these, Professor Andy Lane told me I need to get out more.
Yes. There's a road outside. Use it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, now I do ride past people when they go outside and shout "ride on." Who is this idiot? Right, so sportives very very popular. Always have been since people forgot about Audaxes, but that's another subject. Why do something for 50p when you can spend a huge multiple of that to do exactly the same thing? But we won't go on that one. So broad brush training techniques then for sportive riders.
Go out and buy my book, Successful Sportives.
Oh, that's a lovely one. I like that. Available on Amazon.
I'm thinking about it. I should have gone.
I was going to say, it's on the shelves here behind me.
Behind you. Well, I've not got one. I'm glad. It looks like it's top shelf. It could well be that top shelf up there, that blue one. But anyway, So that would be a broad brush approach for a sportive rider. Steady miles. Build your volume up. Enjoy your riding. Get out as often as you can do. That if you can build your endurance to start with, that's the first thing you want to do. Once you've got a bit of endurance, we start to throw in some mixed intensity. We start to throw some climbs in. It really, again, Dave, depends on what's the sportive that you're aiming for. What's your target event? If we're talking about going off and doing, the king of the marathoners, the marmots, the etappes of the world, well, there's some pretty serious training that goes in for those. If it's something that's local, that's just down the road from you, that it's 20, 30, 40 miles, just get on your bike and enjoy your bike.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. Great advice. This is a broad one, isn't it? Serious advice for the serious racer. So I suppose just context again, I suppose, is king here, but what tips have you got?
For the serious racer, come in for a sports test. And we could say that for the sportive rider as well. But what we then do is we then drill down and find out what your strengths and weaknesses are. So find out what your strengths and weaknesses are. Work out what your weaknesses are and develop those weaknesses to become strengths. I can't give you a specific training session for a serious racer because it depends on what they're good at and what they're bad at. Now, you can analyse race results. If you always get dropped in the sprint, but you're always up for the sprint, well, maybe we need to be doing some top end work. If you don't make it to the sprint in the first place, then your endurance is probably poor. If you get dropped on the climbs, well, is your endurance poor or is it your climbing ability? So we work out what your weaknesses are. I do it in a scientific way, but we then look at what your strengths and weaknesses are and we develop you a training program based upon your strengths and weaknesses. So, a broad brush, there isn't again, this is where I come away from when I coach people, although, you know, I've got plans on Training Peaks that people can pick up and, you know, here's an 8-week, you know, base builder block and here's such and such and the other. At the end of the day, it's about, when you start becoming serious, it's about becoming specific. You know, so learn what your strengths and weaknesses are, develop based on your strengths and weaknesses, and take it forward there.
Superb. It just reminds me, we have I know this is on Zwift, where the draft arguably is nothing like real life. Derby track run a hare and hounds every Thursday night.
Yep.
We had it last night, and my weakness is clearly I can get to the sprint, but I have no sprint at the end. No sprint. And it's interesting, because my FTP is miles higher than the average wattage for that event, but because the pace was up and down all the time.
Yeah,
you know, that's what you're getting to, isn't it? You know, your FTP is no indication of what you need to do in that event.
And that's the point I was trying to make before, is that, you know, and we'll come back to FTP and come back to racing. If I've got an Audax rider, their FTP is through the floor, but they can ride at, you know, 98% of FTP for 12 hours. You know, get to FTP, boom, they go pop, because they're not used to going above it. You know, they'll sit 12, 15, 18 miles an hour upon hour upon hour upon hour. You know, the guys that are riding transcontinental, you know, there's not many of them that have got much of an anaerobic capacity. And if you've not got an anaerobic capacity, you can't really push your FTP up. So looking at FTP number doesn't matter. But again, you're not going to get someone that's going to run, although you call them a serious racer, what they need to do for racing transcontinental is completely different from turning up and riding the track at Derby, to turning up and going and racing a crit race, to turning up and, you know, riding a cross race, to riding a mountain bike race, to going and doing a 7-day stage race. So there's no broad brush approach. It's the personal, attentive, you know, train up there. Train smarter, not harder. Know what your weaknesses are, focus on those weaknesses, and really develop on it.
Super. Just thinking from a running aspect, never knew my FTP when I was running.
Right.
It's funny, isn't it, really? I suppose there's not many Kenyans that know theirs. So someone like Boris Johnson, who needs to get fit and lose weight. So this is somebody, let's say, you know, returning to cycling,
Yeah.
high body mass index,
Yeah.
really wants to make that Lycra look good.
Yep. Great stuff. Absolutely fantastic. And it's probably one of the easiest ways to do it, because it's easy on the joints. And yet you can get a good workout. Now the problem is, again, if I bumped into Boris a few years ago cycling across London, and I bet that's one of the things that he's not doing at the moment, and I bet that's one of the reasons that he's probably put on a bit more weight than he should have done. He's not using his, you know, this is when he was mayor of London. You know, he was sat at a set of traffic lights when I was working in London, but he was using his Brompton to get to and from everywhere. Now it's about small, low intensity, frequent sessions, you know, and that again for me is to a certain extent where Zwift puts people off, because, you know, it's all about, you know, power to weight ratios and FTPs and get these numbers up and push yourself up. No, just get on your bike, ride to the local shops. There's 2 miles there and back. Great. That's fantastic. Small amounts, light intensity riding. It doesn't need to be, you know, high intensity. You don't need to be breaking into a massive sweat. You don't need your breathing to be out of control. You want to be riding at a rate that almost, we're talking now, maybe thinking about taking a breath, but I shouldn't be breathless. I should be on my bike comfortably. And if we can build that up, so you're starting off at 15, 20 minutes and you're building up to an hour, 4, 5, 6 days of the week, low intensity. That is where you're going to start to build that fitness and start to lose weight. Now, of course, don't climb off your bike at the coffee shop and go and have a massive great cream bun and a latte, because then you're suddenly throwing all the calories and the fat back in. So it, you know, it might need a little bit of dietary intervention, but the cycling itself needs to be low intensity, very, very frequent. So, you know, even 2-3 times a day for 10-15 minutes at a time. You know, use things like your commute, use things getting A to B as effectively as you can. But you know, frequently, small and often at low intensity. That's how someone like, you know, Boris is going to get himself back into shape.
Brilliant. Yeah. So just my personal thought on this as well is that's why I love e-bikes as well. You know, I think for people who, you know, who want to go out and do cycling and put off with the fact they might not be able to complete the distance, it enables so many more people now to do proper bike rides. You know, I think that's great, actually.
unless they're using the motor to get uphill and they're freewheeling down the other side. So, regardless of who you are as a cyclist, when you go downhill, and one of my pet hates as a cycling car driver is when I catch up behind a cyclist and I'm courteous and I stay a nice distance back until I can see it's clear to overtake, is when they get to that downhill bit and they start bloody freewheeling. Pedal downhill, for God's sake. I still can't see around you, so if you're going to take a 15-second break and not pedal, I know you're not doing any work.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a by the by.
I do like, it's. I remember somebody saying to me once, it was quite interesting when they went out, when power meters first came in, and they went out for a 200-watt ride.
Yep.
And so they realised they were going up the hills miles slower, but going down them really fast. I thought, quite interesting, really. It's more like a Zwift outdoors. Right, and so what have we got? Is question 8, views on training apps. So static off-the-page plans versus personalised programs. So there's loads of these, as we know. There's loads. You can use them for running, can't you, for cycling, all sorts.
Of course you can. Now, a couple of things that I would, again, coming with my sports test hat on, there's a couple of things I would look at, and again, I can see over my shoulder here, look at that, coaching. We offer coaching. For me, a poor plan is better than no plan at all. Now, when I wrote the Sportives book, I was asked to put in there, a 12, 16-week training plan for somebody going and doing one of the major European Sportives. And I said, no, I won't. Because you know what? Some poor bloke's going to pick it up and think this is gospel. Dr. Garry Palmer's printed this in a book, and here's a 16-week plan to get you fit for your tap. I don't know what your lifestyle is. I don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are. I don't know how well you recover. And whilst we've got this generic idea of, as an older rider, you need more recovery, and as a younger rider, you should be able to recover quicker. I've got guys in their 50s and 60s that do more training than 25-year-olds. Everybody is different. We look at family, we look at stress, we look at work, we look at commuting time, all of these factors, how well your nutrition is, how good your recovery is. If you don't take those into consideration, you might as well not bother. And so, again, picking up a free or a cheap plan from somewhere, whilst it might give you an overview of the structure, it isn't right for you. It's not designed for you. It's as a generic exercise that I've done that will take you forward and help you out. So from my point of view, a personalized plan will give you what you need. So we look at your strengths and weaknesses, we focus it to what you need. And again, I can take a hierarchy here. So, in my mind, a one size fits all, you've got it out of a book, you've got to offer, whether it's Training Peaks, whether it's Zwift, whether it's Trainer Road, you've purchased that program from somewhere. It's not written for you. What happens when Sunday it's your wife's birthday and it's got 3-hour ride? Do you cow down and go, oh no, I'm off out for my 3-hour ride, I'm sorry? Or do you do the family thing? Or, likewise, it's got that long session in there and it's absolutely chucking it down with rain. And you don't want to sit on Zwift for another 3 hours or on Trainer Road for another 3 hours. So, it's not personalised to you. You come home from work on that Friday evening and think, oh, I'm absolutely exhausted. But it's got you 2 hours worth of intervals the next day. Do you do it? Or at least if you've got a coach, a personalised plan, hopefully you can pick up the phone to that coach and go, I'm absolutely exhausted. And that program should or could be modified for you. So, so there's this hierarchy I'd go to, is that, the off-the-peg plans, the static plans, the static apps, better than nothing. Better than no structure, no focus, nothing, or waking up and going, oh, what shall I do today? Then you've got the next hierarchy, which is, in my mind, and I don't mean to belittle people, but regular coaches. What are they basing their information on? They're basing their information off an FTP test. They haven't got a full understanding of what makes you tick, what your strengths and weaknesses are. There is one coach who I will not name on here, but I know coaches 200 plus athletes, sending basically the same training plan to every single athlete within blocks of groups of 30 or 40 every week. And then you've got somebody that works with a small number of athletes and offers coaching, designed for you, bespoke to you. You wake up in the morning with that sore throat, you contact your coach. the coach has got the metabolic, the physiological data, looks at your power zones, looks at your heart rate zones, see how well you're managing, see how well you're coping. And if you miss a session, do we need to carry that session through? So it depends on what you're trying to achieve and what your hierarchy is and where you're trying to go with it. And, let's flick it in a different direction. If you're prepared to go out and spend £5,000 to £10,000 to £15,000 on a bike, and maybe £1,000 on a trainer in the garage that you put your bike on, and you've got a second bike that you're sitting on that's another couple of £1,000 worth, what is £100 to £200 to £250 a month for good quality coaching? Are you really going to go out and buy that Ferrari and go to the Tesco's petrol station and stick in the lowest grade of fuel that you can find because it's cheap? And people will go out and invest on bikes, invest on kits, and they will not look after their body. And that's all I want people to think about, is that, a poor plan is better than no plan at all. But if you're investing so much money in your time and your kit, do it properly.
Interesting. I spoke to somebody who, when they first took on, professional coach such as yourself, and I said, what difference has it made? And they said it was loss aversion. So, they were worried about stopping doing a session, the out of the book session, because they thought they were going to lose fitness or lose sight of the goals. And they said being able to pick up the phone, it just created headspace for them. So I don't think any more about my training. I just pick up the phone. This is how I feel. What should I do today? Do this or don't do this, and force them to rest. And they said it made a massive difference to the performance.
But they don't feel guilty about resting, and I have a number of athletes. I've got, real top end elite athletes. We've got people like Karen that was, Masters road race champion 3 years ago. Verity, I used to coach, 3 peak cyclocross champion. I've got age groupers that have been on the podium at World Tri Champs. I've got age groupers that have been to Kona. At the top end, those guys want to perform. Okay, they're not full-time professional athletes, but those guys want to perform. They want that national medal. They want that world medal. They want to be at the top end. And I've got guys like that I coach. I've got guys at completely the other end of the spectrum who, I just want to get round the Etap. I just want to get round the Marmot. I just want to get round my half Ironman triathlon. But as you say, they are busy professionals, and they're running a business, and the last thing they want to do is get to 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night and think, what training do I do today? How do I move forward with what I'm doing? I felt like this, and they want somebody to have that understanding of them and that understanding their body, that they've got that sounding board to. And that's, I believe, what a good coach should be able to provide. But a good coach that's then just using poor data is perhaps, is one level better than the training plan out of the book. And budgets might force that. But, there are good coaches out there. I mean, and I'll throw it out here. At the moment, my sort of training plan, where I'm writing a bespoke plan for people and it's updated on a 4-weekly basis. It's a lot of money. It's £100 a month. But in the grand scheme of things, when people are spending, several £100s on race entries, they're going out and putting a pair of shoes on their feet, which are £300. They're putting a £200 helmet on. They put a Gabba jacket on that's £300, and they're sitting on a bike that's £3,000, £4,000, £5,000, £8,000 worth. £100 a month is nothing.
And they're probably a member of a gym just in case, and they don't go there.
Yeah. So, when we start, being able to give you a bespoke plan based on your physiology that's updated, changed regularly, that's, that for me is where the investment should be made. It should be made in you, the person. And we were having this discussion before we came online as well. And, the comment I made, I was talking to Boardman many, many years ago, about the time that he was starting in Boardman bikes. He was saying, well, kids these days, they want to be riding on the lightest carbon bike with full race group sets. He said, well, I was racing when I started as a pro. I was grateful to be given a bike. The fact that it was heavy and aluminium and it had, crap gears on it, it was about my physiology. It wasn't about the bike that I was riding. Now we're too much into buying performance. And there's a group of my clients that very, very comically call it financial doping. I'm going to financially dope. I've gone out and I've got a blog article out there where, you look at a ceramic speed rear mech. How much are they? £1,000, £1,200?
Yeah.
They improve your drivetrain efficiency by, I think, 3 to 4% is what they claim.
Yeah, it could even be less than that. It's
It
crazy.
might be less than that, but your drivetrain efficiency is already 98, 99%.
Yeah.
So that's an efficiency of like 1, maybe 2 watts. Now, unless I'm sitting there and generating 440, 450 watts, a la Boardman, Froome, etc., those 3 or 4 watts, at the moment, Dave, I'm sitting here, I'm talking to you, and I'm 10 kilos over my race weight. I don't need to spend £1,200 on a ceramic speed, rear mech.
Yeah. Imagine if you improved your position as well, Gary. That's going to be far more than.
And that's the point. Is there are so many ways that we can improve you by looking after your body, rather than going out and buying technology. So, and maybe I could have gone back and given you, when we were asking about what technology I banned, maybe it was that one. But no, I'm still happy with the answers I've given you.
That's really good. Thank you. So, penultimate question: indoor training. How can you make it most relevant to outdoor goals?
I think use it where you need to. Use it wisely. So, I think the thing that a lot of people, again, potentially don't realise, and when they get onto my old decrepit, King cycle, they put their own bike on, and suddenly, oh look, I'm indoors and I'm moving side to side. Hang on, when I'm on my turbo trainer, when I'm on my Hammer at home, when I'm on my Tax Neo at home, my bike doesn't move. I'm solid, I'm rigid. Yeah. So you're not engaging core properly. You're not activating glutes by sitting in that same position indoors. Although Zwift is good and Trainer Road is good and RGT is good, you're not going up and down through the gear profile. You're not getting out the saddle. You're not getting the whole body experience. So use indoor training wisely. Use it where you need to. Use it when the weather's absolutely atrocious outdoors, or where you need to be doing a really specific session. And I'd actually say a lot of people turn off erg mode. So if you're doing an interval session, actually turn off erg mode. Learn to hold a power output. Learn to hold a heart rate.
God for that.
Rather than sit there and have the bike do it for you.
I hate erg mode. I hate it. If you're riding around the boards don't adjust your blinking power. I mean, it really gets me.
But people, it's a simple solution. Erg mode. Anyway, that's how I would, I'd focus it on what you're doing. So I'd probably occasionally use it for an interval session, and I'd probably mostly use it for steady state riding where conditions outside, or I've got to be riding it. Some of my clients are training 4 or 5 in the morning, so it's safer for them to be inside on an indoor trainer than it is going out, particularly in the winter or when it's wet and icy and hideous. That's where the train. When it's like this, we should be outside.
Yeah, I will be later on this. With my purchase speed bike. Oh yeah, there's another story about. I was just thinking about. I was talking to Andy Lane about how you go wrong with your training by looking at other people's Strava.
Yeah, of course.
Their average speed's faster than mine. I need to go out today and ride faster than them, and it's like just downhill in it. So number 10. So obviously, I know. Number of people, or a good number of people, have been tested by yourself who use indoor training as very serious e-racers. So, from testing people who train mainly indoors, what have you noticed about their physiology that isn't the same as, let's say, elite riders that ride outdoors?
I think, and it's probably, and this is the questions you give me. This is the hardest one to answer, because it's not something that I ever say I've really considered. Oh, you mostly ride, you mostly race indoors, therefore, this is what's going on with your profile. Because I look at everyone as an individual, but I find a lot of people or people that have been coming in and are actually predominantly racing indoors rather than necessarily, using indoors as a supplement to their training, often focus everything around that threshold point and everything around top end anaerobic, how much I can hurt themselves. And because they've been doing a lot of stuff in the virtual world where they're racing others, they're riding with others, their aerobic base is often not good enough. However, that's a situation that I quite frequently come across with riders that do train outdoors. So I wouldn't say it's something that's for people that mostly train indoors. It's something that cyclists, not always, but cyclists in general often overlook their easy base training. You know, their easy miles aren't easy enough. And therefore, because they're doing too many hard, easy miles, their hard stuff isn't hard enough because they're always got a level of fatigue. So regardless of whether you train indoors or outdoors, one of the biggest things that I generally do with people once I've seen that metabolic profile, I tell them to slow down and get zones right. Whereas, you know, you can get a bit distracted by not having the other external stimulations that goes on from being outdoors. Again, I don't generally, I send people to strength and conditioning coaches rather than do it myself. So, you know, I wouldn't be able to say to you, oh, your guys that come indoors have got weaker cores or strong, you know, guys that ride outdoors, you know, but I would expect that you'll find there's that element. The only thing that I'll finish off with is that I rode with a bunch of guys. Probably it would have been 2 years ago now. So it was the year I went and did Hope Route and my 8 days on the Loop charity ride. I went and rode with a bunch of guys that predominantly met on Zwift in, you know, one of the big groups on Zwift, and we went up to the peaks. And I got there, I was told I'd be riding with Group 1, and I looked around and thought, and I actually said to the guy that's told me I'm riding with Group 1, I can't run with these guys. There's not a hope in the world that I can ride with that man there. I can't stay with him on Zwift. He smashes me week in, week out. You know, he'll drop back and he'll tow riders. He'll take interval sessions. I can't stay with him. We went in and we did our 90k. Look, I got in an hour and a half in front of the bloke. The nature, the physiology, the ability of people to play a game and an exercise is completely different to the nature, the physiology of what it takes to be a great cyclist. And just because you can ride well outdoors, as certain people, Adrian Timmis perhaps might tell you, doesn't mean you can race well indoors. And just because you can race really well indoors and you know how to play the game, doesn't mean you're going to make a great outdoor cyclist. So it's taken, you know, what are you trying to achieve? Now, if you're trying to achieve racing indoors and making a huge amount of money by doing e-races and what have you, great stuff. But it doesn't mean you're going to go and find yourself a pro team contract. And likewise, because you're a good pro team rider or you're a good amateur rider, doesn't mean you're going to be able to take on the guys that know how to e-race and you know, little tips and tricks that, you know, one of them I was once told was, at a certain point of this course here, you've got to hit 10 watts per kilo. And if you hit 10 watts per kilo on this particular climb, bang, you put 20 seconds into the riders around you. Tried it a couple of times, every single time. That one little ramp, hit 10, 11 watts per kilo, boom, you're suddenly 20 seconds in front of the field. Now, that's not about my biking ability. You know, again, my biking ability on the S's, you know, I can push on a climb, I push over a summit of a climb, I might have a micro break for 2 or 3 seconds to then get ready to go again. Well, you can't do that on the S's. So you end up having to ride completely differently. So if you learn how to ride Zwift as an example, and I've not spent enough time on, you know, trainer road is different. Trainer road is more about, here's my power output, I'm sitting to my power output, I'm doing a session. So, you know, I've got value of doing that, but, you know, there are certain things that it draws you away from as well. And again, RGT, when I was using it, I was finding it wasn't adding resistance to my hammer. So I think I possibly set something up wrong, and it's just like I was riding with no resistance whatsoever, looking at a pretty picture basically. So my biggest example really is to use Zwift, is that if I've learned how to ride indoors on Zwift, it doesn't mean I'm going to be able to hit a climb or ride an Alp or, you know, change my gears appropriately, you know, and that's the problem. I think we've got to try and, you know, I've got some riders who are fairly novice riders, and, you know, silly things like being able to grab a bottle out of the bottle cage and take a drink while keeping the bike moving, you know, in a straight line without drifting across the road or without having to stop. You don't get stuff like that from training indoors. You know, I remember Peter Keane many years ago giving me an absolute bollocking is the best way to explain it. You know, we were riding around Goodwood Circuit together and I kept on half-wheeling him. And I wasn't doing it intentionally. I was a spotty 18, 19-year-old, you know, and I kept on half-wheeling him. And I got an absolute torrent of abuse after a while. I didn't know I was doing it because no one had ever picked me up on it. But, and again, I'll hold my hand up. It's been a while since I've been out on a club ride. But, you know, when I have been, you very rarely find there's a ride leader that knows how to hold a group. Riders don't know how to ride through and off. So I think the downfall of training indoors is we lose all the road skills.
Yeah, yeah.
And we need somehow to bring those road skills back.
I noticed something on Sunday, I think it was, I was out. It's terrible and it's Friday, I haven't been out since. But anyway, so it was Sunday. I noticed the inability of people outdoors to raise their hand like that when they see another cyclist. If they're frightened to lift their hand off the bars.
Yeah. They just saw it as you and they just wanted to ignore you.
Yeah, with my Zwift shorts on. Yeah. But Garry, mate, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.